Good morning, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and welcome back to Law and Crime, where we cover some of the most interesting live trials in the country today. And I'm so happy you're joining us because we have a really important day for you and a lot of interesting interviews lined up. And I want to start from where we're at right now and what we have later on this morning. So as you know, our main live trial of the day will be the Shawn Grate case out of Ohio. We're carefully monitoring the feed. This is that accused serial killer who's on trial for many different things. He faces 23 different charges, including he is being charged in connection with the deaths of 2 women, Elizabeth Griffith and Stacy Hicks, as well as the kidnapping and rape of a 3rd woman who has been unidentified. Now, that 3rd woman made that 911 phone call, the one that we've been playing throughout this week, the one the jurors heard. That 911 phone call is what tracked police ultimately to Mr. Grate, and now he is on trial for many of these crimes. We are going to continue that coverage today, and it is anticipated, although it might not be, it is anticipated that that woman who made that 911 phone call may testify today. We'll update you as soon as we know more, and as soon as we have a live feed in the courtroom, we'll make sure to go to it. But now, I have to tell you about a really big interview that we have today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're ready. For all of you who were following the Claude Tex MacGyver case, the one about that prominent attorney who was just found guilty of 4 counts. He was charged with malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, possession of a firearm, as well as an influencing witness charge. He was found guilty of 4 of those counts, including the felony murder charge, faces possible life imprisonment. We have with us today at around 10:30 Eastern Standard Time, prosecuting attorney Clint Rucker. That's right, the man that prosecuted this case, the one that you saw every day in the courtroom. I'll be interviewing him at 10:30, and I know a lot of you have questions about this case, and who better to answer them than Clint Rucker, the man himself. So stay tuned. 10:30 a.m. is when we expect that interview. You don't want to miss it. Now, again, I also want to preview another case that we're covering here on Law and Crime. Let's go over to Las Vegas. We're covering the David Copperfield case. Remember, David Copperfield, as well as the MGM Grand, are being sued by a man named Gavin Cox. Gavin Cox was an audience member, a participant in one of David Copperfield's magic tricks, the Lucky 13 magic trick. He says he was injured during the course of this trick, that he slipped on some debris. He was being rushed out during the course of this trick, and it was ultimately Mr. Copperfield, his team, and the MGM Grand's fault that he slipped, and he suffered some pretty serious injuries, including a lesion to his brain, injuries to his spine, his shoulder. It's no laughing matter, but it's an interesting case to follow nonetheless, because during the course of this trial, we may be learning more about David Copperfield's tricks. We have a special report about this case from Aaron Keller, so take a look at this so far.
World-famous illusionist David Copperfield might be forced to break the cardinal rule of magic and reveal the secrets of his illusions in open court. Copperfield is being sued in Las Vegas civil court by 57-year-old Gavin Cox, who claims he was injured during a 2013 Copperfield show in Las Vegas. The British tourist, who once cooked for British royalty, claims he fell and struck his head on the ground after tripping over construction debris as one of Copperfield's assistants whisked him and other audience members through a dark, secret passageway during the disappearing stunt. Cox claims he suffered brain trauma and is forced to wear an oxygen lung at night because he stops breathing when he's asleep. He's seeking punitive damages from Copperfield and MGM for alleged negligence. The illusionist and hotel strongly deny all claims, stating Cox's injuries were pre-existing and or unrelated medical conditions. This is Aaron Keller for the Law and Crime Network.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so that's the David Copperfield case. We will be covering that either here or definitely on lawandcrime.com. Now, Mr. Copperfield, who had taken the stand earlier in the week, he'll come back on the stand next week. Some other witnesses are being called in that case, but we anticipate that he will return to the stand next week. And before we get into a full analysis of the David Copperfield case, one quick note. As I said, I'll be interviewing Clint Rucker later today at 10:30 a.m., but at 1 p.m., our very own Amy Dash will be interviewing juror number 61 from the Tex MacGyver case. Not only was she a juror during the deliberations and can shed some light on what the jury was thinking during that long deliberation process, but she was also continually late during the trial. She became pretty known, and she made a comment to the media after the jury was delivered their deliberation, after they delivered their verdict. And she was one of the more colorful characters during this entire case. So you're not going to want to miss that interview. Amy Dash will be interviewing her at around 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, let's switch back to the David Copperfield case because there's a lot to talk about here. And I know you don't want to just hear from me. I get kind of boring. So I'd like to talk with right now, joining me via Skype, is prosecutor Kenya Johnson. Kenya, great to see you.
Hi, Jesse.
Okay, so David Copperfield, right? He took the stand. I don't know if you had an opportunity to see a lot of his testimony, but what is Benedict Morelli, the plaintiff's attorney here, Gavin Cox's attorney, what is he hoping to get from David Copperfield on the stand? Because from what I've seen so far, it hasn't been a lot.
It seems as if the defense attorney is trying to get David Copperfield to admit that he would have accepted some fault for the injury of this visitor. And so it'll be important. David Copperfield kind of danced around the issue. If he had been at fault, he seemed to be willing to accept fault. But if there was debris that no one anticipated, David Copperfield wouldn't quite admit that he would be at fault. And so that's the subject of the entire trial. Who's at fault? Who's responsible? Usually when people buy tickets to events, oftentimes there are disclaimers on the back. It would be interesting to see what type of legal safeguards were in place to participate in this particular experiment or magic trick.
When you watch David Copperfield on the stand, a lot of his answers are, can you repeat the question? I don't understand the question, or that's not a yes or no answer. And he was on the stand for a while. He's going to probably come back next week. I think if you're sitting in the jury, like you said, he's dancing around these issues. I don't see, I mean, he's ultimately said, look, that path being clear is my responsibility, but I didn't see anything that was out of the ordinary. I didn't see anything that was dangerous. He ultimately, would you say we're at where we're at in this case, meaning it didn't settle beforehand, because he wants to make a statement that, look, I run a tight ship, I'm a professional, my team are professionals, we didn't do anything wrong. Is it more than just paying out the money?
It's more than paying out the money. He has a reputation to protect. His proprietary details and how he performs his magic tricks, how he goes about scoping locations and executing those tricks, and his general reputation of being a master illusionist is very important to him. So basically, his career is on the line, and any way he can avoid admitting fault where there's no fault due, he's going to try to do so, and rightfully so.
Now, not to take away from Gavin Cox's injuries, because these are some pretty serious injuries that are alleged, but when you have a situation where it appears that Mr. Cox may be the only person that was injured. Now, I know there's been talk about other people coming forward saying that they were injured, but when you have a show that's been going on for 15 years and almost 100,000 people were participants, or that seems to be the number that we know right now, is it a bit strange that he's the first person to come out and sue David Copperfield?
Well, if there's ever been any sort of lawsuit or settlement, I'm sure a non-disclosure agreement would have been filed because this is the type of thing that you definitely don't want to get out. And so even though the margin of error is extremely small, just like with the airline industry, even if you have 99% success, 1% means that an airplane may have crashed, causing many casualties. So it is very important for Mr. Copperfield to keep his legal affairs under wraps so that it doesn't impact his reputation and his show.
Well, let me see if I just understand that real quick. Are you saying there could be a possible situation where somebody came to David Copperfield's team and said, look, my client was injured, we can file a lawsuit, we haven't filed one yet, they settled it out of court, they didn't even file a lawsuit, we might not know about it, but wouldn't David Copperfield know about it? I mean, he took the stand and said that no one else has been injured, and if he knows about that, that would be a problem if he lied under the oath. So again, I guess I'm a little confused.
There's a fine line between a lawsuit and perhaps filing an insurance claim. So there's several steps before things actually make it to court. There may have been certain allegations that were handled strictly by his insurance company that were never brought to his attention. Certainly a lawsuit and a trial would be brought to his attention where he's named as the defendant. But in part, if someone were injured and they merely got an attorney, reached out to the MGM Grand or the show's insurance company, they could actually file a claim. David David Copperfield never have known about it, and that could be in any range of numbers.
It's possible, considering that David Copperfield on the stand didn't seem to know a lot about this case, didn't seem to know a lot about what was happening. In fact, he wasn't even sure why he has a corporation in his name. He's like, the lawyers did this. I don't really know why they did it. Didn't really understand the particulars of the case. Says this is not his specialty. So it's possible that he might not have known what happened to him in the past. Can you stand by? What I want to do is switch gears. I want to talk about the Shawn Grate case, a really, really disturbing case out of Ohio that we're following when you see this potential serial killer who's not only on trial for the deaths of 2 women and the kidnapping and rape of a 3rd, but he has also been in the media saying that he's killed other people. Really disturbing case. What I want to do is play a short report about the openings. Remember, the opening statements by the prosecutor in this case. It can help summarize more about what we can expect in this case. Take a look.
Trial of a suspected serial killer, 41-year-old Shawn Grate, is underway in Ashland, Ohio. Grate is accused of kidnapping and sexually assaulting a woman, and he's been charged in connection with the murders of 2 other women in an abandoned house. Grate was arrested when that woman he was holding captive was able to call 911 while he was asleep.
What's the problem? I've been abducted. Who abducted you? Shawn Grate. Where's she at now? Asleep.
In an opening statement, prosecutor Christopher Tunnell made it clear this case was not a whodunit.
The evidence will show beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant was found asleep and naked in bed in a house that a terrified naked woman escaped from after being repeatedly assaulted and raped by this defendant. 2 decomposing bodies were found inside, having been kidnapped and murdered by this defendant.
He also went into detail about the defendant's involvement in the murder of 2 women found inside that abandoned house.
Even as he gives multiple versions of his killing Elizabeth to Detective Major, and he admits to killing Elizabeth Griffith. What exactly happened to Elizabeth Griffith, we'll never know. It would seem that after Stacy bought the defendant a cup of coffee at BP, she gave him a ride back to his place on Covert Court. And once inside that house, she never left. Recall that officers in their initial sweep of the residence, after forcing their way into the basement, sensed something was terribly wrong downstairs from the smell. The stench of death was strong. And after Stacy was strangled, she was wrapped in a basement and taken down the basement steps.
The prosecutor summed up his opening statement by reiterating there is no doubt the defendant is guilty of these alleged heinous crimes.
The evidence will show this is not a whodunit case. The evidence will show that this defendant is guilty of all 23 counts as contained in the indictment, all specifications thereto, beyond a reasonable doubt.
The defense did not give an opening statement, at least not yet. Grate faces 23 counts, including aggravated murder and kidnapping. If convicted, he could face the death penalty. For the Law and Crime Network, this is Aaron Keller.
A lot at stake here for multiple people in the Shawn Grate case. We have a new witness that's on the stand. This is a live feed into that Ohio courtroom. We don't want you to miss anything, so let's go live right now.
2001.
And what are your current duties?
First shift supervisor for Corrections Division and also the K-9 Division.
Okay, what is the Corrections Division?
That would be taking care of the inmates in the jail. Pretty much it.
Okay, and how long have you been doing that?
I've been doing that for about approximately 14 years.
Okay. And between September 13th and October 17th of 2016, were you working in the jail?
Yes.
And were you approached by Shawn Grate?
I was.
And what did Mr. Grate want?
He had some questions about contacting Detective Major and also questions about how we do things within the jail.
Okay. Reference his questions about Detective Major. What did he want?
Basically that he would like to speak to her.
Okay. And was that contact initiated by you or by him?
That was by him.
Okay. And then what would you do?
I would either text it to Detective Major or I'd make a phone call. And I don't remember which I did at that point because this happens a lot with other inmates as well. So it's either, if I'm real busy, I'll send a text to the detectives, or if I'm not real busy, I'll make the phone call directly to them.
Okay. And approximately how many times were these requests made of you by Mr. Grate?
Personally, to me, maybe once or twice. Other times it was through my officers. They were instructed to contact me, and I would contact the people they want to talk to.
Okay. And were there multiple such requests from Mr. Grate?
I believe there was around 4 or 5 probably total.
In that time period?
Right.
Okay. And each time you would contact Detective Major?
Yes.
Thank you, Sergeant. Nothing further.
Cross.
No questions to this witness, Judge. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Freeland. You're excused. Next witness.
Okay, that was a rather short witness. Again, I'm here with Prosecutor Kenya Johnson. Real quick, before this next witness goes on, what did we learn? We learned that he wanted to contact the investigator in this matter?
Yes, and we learned that perhaps the defendant was willing to make a statement to police to admit. He already wrote letters to the news station, and so maybe he had something very important to tell the police.
All right, Kenya, let's listen in. Stand by. I want to get your analysis off of this next witness. Okay, so we're looking at the testimony of David Hammond, as BCI special agent, talking about the collection of evidence here. Again, I'm here with Prosecutor Kenya Johnson. Kenya, yesterday we saw that a lot of the testimony was about tracking Grate's movements. And this indictment's interesting in the sense it's 23 counts, and it's everything from burglary to rape to murder. So tracking what he broke into and what he burglarized and what he was up to, I thought was a very unique perspective of this kind of case.
Well, there's different prosecution strategies. Some people want to take it by victim and track exactly what he did as it relates to a particular victim. And some prosecutors may go chronologically and take the jury down a timeline from the moment he began this criminal enterprise until he was discovered. So it's a matter of trial strategy. But what we're seeing is that we find out exactly what he did at every point of the day, and we're slowly making the case in small pieces that the jury can digest.
Right, and it's something to digest when you hear about the different facts of this case. That house of horrors, I think, was a lot for the jury to take in, from maggots to decomposed bodies to physical restraints to garbage lying around. What do you think the jury's thinking when they hear that kind of information?
I immediately think that, is there a mental health issue going on? Are we looking at such severe depravity that he has taken a break from reality? Definitely some troubles in the mind, and so the jury is probably already grossed out. And when you start strong and gross the jury out and make a strong connection, I think things are downhill for the defense after that.
Well, we'll have to see what they plan to do. They didn't provide an opening statement, but they may do an opening statement later on. We'll have to see. Okay, everybody, let's go back live into the courtroom. We'll learn a little bit more about the collection of evidence in this case. Okay, again, we're trying to learn how this DNA of Mr. Grate was collected, in what way, did it follow the proper procedures, and everything seems to be pointing towards yes. But again, I'm here with Prosecutor Kenya Johnson. Kenya, I want to talk about something that happened yesterday. We saw a lot of evidence tracking Stacy Hicks, or her whereabouts and where she was in the moments before she ultimately met Grate and when she was went missing. Why is that important to know for the jury in terms of she went to get her nails done, then she went to Walmart, then she went back to the nail salon, and then we know that later on she was driving and she had that flat tire. Why is it important to know what she was doing the rest of the day?
Well, this definitely personalizes the victim. It allows the jury to understand what she was doing and the vulnerable position that she was in. Excuse me. The vulnerable position that she was in by having the flat tire. She was in need of assistance, and it sets up how the defendant could have entered into her life and offered assistance and perhaps engaged so that it could ultimately violate her.
And it's something to see when you see a victim who hours later you know is not going to be doing so good, is going to be meeting her fate, and interesting to see living her normal life as if nothing was about to happen.
This definitely ties the jury in emotionally to her. They feel like they know her. They heard from her son, who talks about how often they spoke every day and that he immediately knew something was wrong when he couldn't reach her. And so it goes to show that there were a lot of people that cared for her and that she was just an average person. And it sort of personalizes this crime and really puts fear in the jury heart, that in their hearts, that this could happen to anyone. She was just a regular woman going about her day.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to go back to the courtroom. We're trying to analyze what the DNA that was collected from Mr. Grate was. Let's listen in live. Quick sidebar there in the Shawn Grate case. Again, I'm here with Kenya Johnson. Kenya, the collection of evidence, the chain of custody, it becomes such a big issue in all kinds of cases, right?
Yes, because it's so technical and the rules have to be exact. The defense is trying to ensure, and the prosecution has to prove, that there was no tampering with any of this biological evidence or physical evidence. So there are certain steps that collectors have to take. They have to seal the items. It has to go to the lab. Only a special person can unseal it and test the evidence. And so this is very crucial, because if anything is done wrong, some of this evidence could possibly be excluded, and then the jury would be instructed not to consider that. That's usually handled in a pretrial motion as far as its admissibility. So now we're looking at an exercise in a procedure just to confirm that the proper procedures were followed.
So it's not just that the evidence could be taken out of court. Even if it's not taken out of court, it could raise doubt in the minds of the jurors and say, wait a second, was this investigation done properly? And have you seen that be a cause for concern in jurors during their deliberations?
The number one case I can think of is the O.J. Simpson trial. There was the allegation that there was tampering with the biological evidence that was collected by Detective Furman and his team, and it subsequently created so much doubt that they were able to get an acquittal at that trial. Yeah,
it's a big issue. Big issue. Sometimes it's glossed over, but it's a really big issue nonetheless. We're waiting for another witness to come to the stand. That might be happening right now. We do not know who this person is yet, but we're about to find out. She's being sworn in, so let's listen in live. As we get some background information about this witness, let's talk again with Kenya Johnson about the defense here. What do you anticipate, Kenya, they will do during the course of this trial? I know that they may be trying to get Dr. John Fabian on the stand to talk about what mental disease or defect Mr. Grate may suffer from. But again, this case is unique in that it's bifurcated, it's split up. What do you imagine that they're going to be doing?
Well, it seems with the way that the defendant just consented to the collection of such incriminating evidence and even made the admissions that he committed even more murders, there's certainly the mental health piece, and that will likely be the strongest. However, I question whether he's even competent to stand trial at this time. That would have been the biggest defense that a defense team could have mounted, would be to avoid trial completely. Now that they are proceeding forward with trial, they can continue to argue the mental health, but it'll still be criminal responsibility due to mental health issues. And so he could still very much serve a lot of time in custody. So their defense at this point is going to either be mental health or trying to poke holes in the state's case, which is certainly going to be difficult, but starting with the collection of the evidence. But the admissions certainly make it difficult, and the contextual evidence, this house of horrors, make it very difficult. Usually cases like this, your slam dunk cases, don't go to trial unless there's some sort of special defense or trick that we have yet to uncover. Trials are usually made of the gray area cases, such as the Tex MacGyver, but there are such strong connections and evidence to the defendant and the victims that are listed in the indictment that there's still more to come with this defense.
And we can't forget that the case is split up. There's the guilt or innocence phase, then there's that sexual predator specifications that are really unique. So if they find him guilty of guilt or of committing these offenses, then they have to determine that second phase, and then after that they have to determine what he should be sentenced to. That's a unique aspect of this case, correct?
Sure. So the second phase in Ohio is going to allow for an enhancement of the charges. And that second phase is evoked once the guilty verdicts are reached on the first phase. And then we go into the punishment phase. So each of these phases do nothing but increase the punishment that he may receive based on the guilty verdicts in the first phase.
All right. We'll have to see. We'll have to see how it goes and what the defense ultimately does. Haven't done a ton, but who knows what they will have up their sleeve. Let's listen in live to this witness. Pretty unbelievable. Pretty horrific to hear the details of what this woman suffered. I want to bring in Kenya Johnson again. You're listening in graphic detail to what this young lady suffered. I'm left speechless. I just want your impression from this.
Depth of the depravity of these offenses, and it also gives us insight into what some of the other victims may have gone through that were located at that house. These were days of torture. There was abuse, sexual, physical. There was priming. He was trying to get her to perform oral sex better. So he intended to keep her there for a while, and he was grooming her to be the for his sexual purposes. This was absolutely some of the most horrendous testimony I've ever heard.
I mean, the details of it, you can hear the witness, Lisa Riley, who performed this exam, tearing up. She's getting extremely emotional, and the jurors are listening to that.
Absolutely, and you can only imagine her struggle to remain professional as she examined the victim and just heard and had to document all of the things that happened. She reports that the victim was rocking and was crying, and you can just only imagine what this has done to her psychologically. And at this point, it was all about the collection of evidence, so it was a very sterile environment and very business and professional as they went about the work. But you can only imagine that the nurses would have wanted to reach out to this victim and wanted to soothe her in some way.
Kenya, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your insight. We can't wait to have you back to talk about this case or another one down the line.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, guys, let's go back into the courtroom.